everything around me. Green, get the money, dollar bill, yo.
If you don't think for a second that players like Zybeck are going to be circling the refineries stealth like sharks, waiting to jump people the second they turn in their caravan run, you're deluding yourself. It is not going to be. It's not going to be as easy as harvesting.
One. Like you guys, he's just drawn that way.
So, so for those of you who, a lot of you, I'm sure, have been to these before. A few of you maybe have never sat in one of these. So, if so, apologies for it being a little bit bumpy because we're changing kind of gears on how we do this. This is a general theme for us over the course of the last month. I've gotten some questions from people on how our company has dealt with the whole coronavirus situation. So I thought I'd go ahead and give you guys a quick update just to kick things off. So as it turns out, the executive management team of Artcraft is germophobic. We didn't know this, but we all apparently have that in common because Gordon and I started kind of getting concerned and watching that on John Hopkins' dashboard way back in January and February, and we were kind of waiting to see how the whole thing came down. At that point, Gordon started like ordering antiseptic wipes for the office and stuff like that. In early March, we had a company meeting where we got everybody together and said we were considering sending everybody home. And at the time, it was still kind of early enough that everybody was giving me weird, puzzled looks, like, why are you acting like this is a thing? But we told them at the time, we told the team that if we had to choose between being wrong one way or the other, we would rather be wrong in a way that made us look dumb than be wrong in a way that put any of our team members at risk. So we actually made the call pretty early in March to send everybody home. I think by the 11th, we had already got everybody up and running with VPN access so they could check in and out code. They could do their work from home. We had ordered not just headsets and cameras and things for people. We also ordered like desks in some cases and chairs and things like that. So we sent everybody home in waves. And by that Friday, the only people left in the office were the ops team, Gordon and me, and a couple of people who, just kind of refused to leave their desk. And by the end of Friday, that was no longer an option. So pretty much at that point, the whole company was transitioned to working remotely. So we've been actually doing this for a couple weeks now. And it has been a very interesting experiment. You can ask Val my opinion prior to this of work from home. I've never really been a fan of it. What I have found now is that it is in some ways challenging. It's really hard. I've noticed communication-wise, like it's harder when I can't turn around and just say, hey, Debbie Sue, do we do this or do we do that? In some ways, though, I've found that it actually is kind of helpful because I find that I have more uninterrupted time to work on GDDs and do bug task tracking and things like bugs and task tracking, things like that. So overall, I think that we have weathered the storm fairly well. That's probably where I would summarize. What do you think, Blair?
Yeah, I think it was definitely weird going back into the beginning of March. And Gordon started talking about this in meetings, like, be prepared to send your teams home. And the media and everything it was a nothing burger at that time, right? And it was just like, wow, okay. And I came home to and talked to my wife and like, we're going to start working from home next week. And she's like, well, that's odd. No one's really making anything of this yet. And lo and behold, Todd Gordon were right. I think Gordon has been waiting probably 30 years to do this.
He's been prepping forever. Yeah, I think that's probably valid. Yeah.
Right. He's just been waiting for the moment for everything to start happening. And it was great because we were on top of it and we had everybody home and settled in the company by the time the rest of the country started to react. So for us, it really wasn't a big deal because we'd already started to get over the bumps. And just the shift in working for us has been, I actually find I get more stuff done. And we're talking in Google Hangouts and Slack chats all the time now. And it's so much easier to just grab an engineer and share my screen and go, hey, I'm having a problem right here. And normally if I'm in the office, I have to go grab somebody, convince them to come back to my desk and look at it, and they don't have the debugging tools. And so it's actually way more efficient for us to knock out a bug really quick because we can just look at the the data instantaneously. So it's actually pretty great for a lot of us.
Yeah, so in some ways it's actually been beneficial. I'll tell you some of the ways that it has not been beneficial. So we used to have team stand-ups every morning and we'd be in and out within about 5 minutes. Now I find that about 2 hours of every morning is taken up of stand-ups because we've broken it into smaller chunks. The good part of that is it means I'm getting more detail out of each person and what's going on. So that helps. The bad part though is just it kind of chews up a big chunk of my day. I also find that the general isolation from the team has been harder, right? It's easier when you can just shout down the hall for somebody. But anyway, I'm sure we're not unique in this, right? This is kind of being felt across the entire nation right now. But since you guys since we've been transparent from the beginning, I don't think it's crazy for us to continue in that vein. And we've had a lot of questions about how we're weathering the storm, and I would say fairly well. Hopefully the team as a whole is attitude-wise is also being able to stay positive. I know that it's tough. It's tough being disconnected from everybody. So, but overall, I think it's going well. I'm glad that it had not a giant impact on our ability to get the test out. I mean, at the end of the day, we were able to get the test out while we were all remote. We've already shifted over now to the quick iteration cycle of getting a test running on test, getting the feedback from it, getting those bugs in the system, getting them out to people, getting the blockers and crits fixed as quickly as possible, and iterating and getting it back out. It's a little bumpy, but I think it's overall working pretty well. We'll talk a little bit about where we are with tests. So I'm delighted that we finally got a version up on God's Reach you guys could play. I know that there are still many kind of odd things relating to movement and combat and stuff like that. Just as a reminder, that's why we put things on test before we go live, because there are bugs that we have trouble finding with the restricted number of players that we can bring to bear being our own team, right? We have to kind of get more load on the servers a lot of times to find things. We are knocking those out as quickly as possible. So I'm glad you guys were able to get in and see some of the stuff that we've been working on for the last, I don't know how many months, but you guys have really seen maybe 10 or 15%. If you recall from previous Q&As, there were kind of 3 major tent poles for this version. There was guild versus guild support. You guys haven't seen that. There was a full city building system in the Dregs campaigns for you to build different buildings and build your defenses. So we've really very much built a almost an RTS or Civ-style strategy game there. You guys haven't seen any of that. And then lastly, we added a whole strategy layer to the top, which you guys have seen a little bit of because you were able to click on previous campaigns and see some of the UIs related to it. But that is basically kind of the tip of the iceberg of how that system actually works. So all of that stuff we are now testing internally. In fact, when you see the test server come up, but it says campaign restricted, that means that we're actually running an internal team test on those systems in preparation to get them out to you. And I get the question every day, well, when is that going to be? And it literally, we're still in a day-for-day wait and see. We've got a list of crit and blocker bugs. Generally, the orders are trivial bugs or, yeah, we should get to them. That's a thing, but whatever. Minors are slightly more important. Majors are, hey, this is really impacting for some portion of players. Crits are, wow, this is really impacting for most players, if not all. And blockers are, this is just flat out wrong. Like, we can't do it. So our general goal is to try and clear all blockers before we go to test, to clear all crits before we go to live, and then we get to the other ones kind of in order as we can. So we're down to a very, very small list of crits and blockers to get the dregs testing in front of you, but there are a few there, and some of them seem to be pretty wily. So I promise we're not sitting on a build that's ready to go, just trying to cause you pain. With the moment we feel like this thing is ready, we will get it out. In fact, arguably with the version that we just put out, some people have felt like it was a little too buggy and we should have held on it longer. This is a give and a take. Every time we have a build, we want to give it to you, but we also want it to be well received. So we always have to make a judgment call. So anyway, there you go. There's a quick update.
Plus, there was, don't forget, Todd, that there was just so many other systemic changes to classes and skills and talents that we just kind of wanted people to shake that out in God's Reach.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Right. It really wasn't just about, even though a considerable portion of this was to the strategy game and the dregs in this milestone, we still had a lot of changes. And actually, you guys have been great on testing, getting us feedback. We did a huge, we haven't even talked about the huge powers refactor that we finally finished in this milestone, and actually finding all of the effects bugs and the screen shake bugs and the powers that just didn't get converted properly has been a huge help to us. And we needed you guys to get in there and actually start working with the interactions of the powers, how power A and power B mix together to explode, and then we go and fix it.
Yep, for sure. And the new class, right? And the,
yeah.
and the seasons, and the removal of the survival tray. And I mean, there are a bunch of changes. I didn't mean to shortcut how much stuff has been exposed to the players already. I just wanted to say there's so much more coming. I would say the bulk of the work that was done, probably 85% of the stuff, it was actually work done. But for the design team, for example, and the art team, the majority of those things have not actually been seen yet by anybody externally. But that's coming very, very quick. I can tell because we're getting through that list of issues. And then once you guys come in, you create and find for us a whole new list of issues that we then have to knock through as well. So okay, I think that's a pretty good general update. Val, do you intend to update all the classes according to the new standard you've set with Frostweaver? The powers just seem smoother and more responsive. Are you going to go back and make a pass over all the character classes to get to that same quality level?
Well, this is a big, many-headed Hydra question, right? Because we have to start with, hey, we just updated the powers because we've been working on this for probably to try and get the powers to feel good on the client the second you press the button and still be verified on the server and have a bunch of logic checks in there that the server has to check that the client's not sure about, and it needs to happen instantaneously so it feels good. We've been working on that for, I want to say, a year and a half. We had one method that just didn't work out well for us, and that's actually what you've been playing in 5.100. 5.1.10, a lot of the core foundation work with the power system has been how to make it feel good the second you press the button. The effects start playing, the animations start playing. At the same time, it's launching a message off to the server, and the server is validating whether you can do that or not, or what to do with it based on adjectives and tags and other things that we have going on. So that effort, version 2 of that came to fruition in 5.1.10, which is why you hear us talking about we need to fix that power, we need to fix this power, because we did a whole underlying tech rework on the entirety of the power system to make it feel super smooth, super snappy, and it's clearly you guys are noticing that it's doing its thing. So this is far better than the 5.100 version. And going specifically into the Frostweaver is the last class. So the last class always benefits from all of the learning that you've had on the project, what you can do with your tools, and your animators are in full swing. They know what they should do to make a class at that point. And everybody basically knows how to do it. It usually comes together the fastest, and it is probably one of your best classes. That being said, yes, as always, we are going to loop back around and make additional changes to the other classes as we feel we need them. Probably our poor knight now, he's been he's always the first,
right? He's the first. So the opposite of what you said with the last, which is they're usually the one that gets left the furthest behind. So he definitely needs some love. I agree with that.
Yeah. So and that's the story of live on any MMO, right? Every update, teams always go back and they tend to make passes on classes that need some love. They balance down the classes that are overpowered. The newest class is always the most OP and the most broken, and everyone's always fascinated with it. So that's just kind of the life cycle of an MMO. So yeah, we will, once we make it through 110, and we're probably into some more of the beta stuff, we will be making passes at the disciplines, and then we'll be going back to some of the classes to making sure that they're all kind of balanced as we want them to be. And some of our older abilities may just die on the vine. We still, I mean, we always reserve the right to just pull a thing if it's not working, because it just is. It's better to do that than to try and force it through usually.
Why can't I add any powers to the burrow tray as a Ganetian cleric or knight?
Okay, so one of the things that, again, part of the new powers, what it enabled us to do was to actually make a tray swap power a toggle power, which is what I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. And I've always kind of wanted to do that with the burrow racial power for the Ganetian, because it took up a tray slot, which meant that now you're limited to 7, which I wasn't too keen on, but it was, hey, I can just give them a stealth tray, and when they're in there, it's charging them stamina, and then when they come out, I can put a cooldown on that tray swap. So I've just basically given them a bar slot back plus a limited duration stealth, and it's pretty cool because now you can have an army of Ganetians hiding and doing
which
whatever
we've actually, which we have now seen, and it is both hilarious and effective.
Right, and what's cool is a lot of other games don't allow classes like clerics and knights to go into stealth. Period. Right? That's just not it's usually part of, because everything comes down from D&D rules. Like that's your canonical rogue assassin kind of leathery a niche, and it's not something you see in classes that are typically your plate wielders or your holy guys. They just kind of aren't guys who ever get stealth. So it's kind of cool that in the Crowfall race structure that we have a subset of knights and clerics who do have a limited use stealth. Now, what we didn't give them, as this question asks, is we didn't give them giant ambush openers, because that is usually your rogue archetypical thing.
Yeah, so I'll piggyback on a little bit. As this is the kind of area that I really that I would really like us to go back and spend some time on disciplines. Like this is an area that I think it would be really cool to be able to add some particular area, some particular powers, but in order to get those powers with this type of a character, you have to invest in it. So that's why I like the idea of disciplines having their own trees, and I like the idea of disciplines requiring skill points, because by doing that, I now am not as good as if I'd just been a straight line knight or if I'd have been a straight line cleric. So that's what I'm hoping that we'll have time to go back and do, because I think that to me, the disciplines that are more interesting are things that change the behavior of my build, right? Being able to say, I like dipping, right? This is a concept in D&D where, hey, yeah, I made a barbarian, but I'm going to go ahead and dip and take one level of rogue, just because I think it'd be interesting for me to occasionally get, to take expertise in a skill or something like that. Being able to dip like that is very, very fun, because you're kind of, it's another exploration game, effectively. You're exploring these powers and skill trees, trying to figure out a unique combination that is really synergistic and really works well. So I feel like that our initial pass at disciplines, which we actually did well over a year ago now, was cool that we got something in, and some of them, like archery, hit that pretty well. I think it's a good place for us to be able to segue into harvesting and exploration and crafting. I don't feel like we have enough of those interesting kind of game changer, build changer mechanics right now. So I'd really like to go back and find a way to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say archery is probably our best example of that.
It
right
is.
now.
Yeah, it's really cool. Placing Frostweaver ice feels random. Sometimes they place 30 meters away. Sometimes they place right in front of me. I'd prefer if they work like Druid orbs, where you have an indicator of where you place them every time. That is an interesting and different mechanic. So can you talk through that a little bit? First of all, just cover how it's different. That would be helpful for people who
so this is largely an input question, which is, and you may not realize that you do it on a Druid, but a Druid placing an orb is a two-step mechanic, where they get a ground targeting reticle when they click the button, and then where they put that in the world is where the thing is created. And you may have not realized that you had to click twice. Healing circles do that. Ranger Barrage does that. And one of the things that Mark Hallish was trying to do with the Frostweaver was eliminate one of those clicks. So again, part of the reason the Frostweaver feels very smooth is you just click once, and where your reticle is right underneath it. We call it collider sweep on our side. It's going to put the orb. So what I've already noticed, and I've walked a couple of the streamers through this as they're playing, if they lift their reticle up, they will place their frost armor 10 feet in front of them. If they're looking down, the frost armor is going to place right at their feet, because that's where they're looking, and that's where their reticle in the center of the screen is going to intersect with the earth, and that's where it's going to go ahead and create that. So a good example would be Ice Arbory, which is one of the Frostweaver powers, which creates a whole bunch of armor for everybody to grab. If they're looking at the ground when they do that, all of the armor is, in the world that it creates out of the ice, is all bunched up. But if they're looking upwards slightly, the armor is more spread out. So basically, it's definitely going to take a little bit of getting used to, and it is a higher skill cap because you have to realize what you're looking at and the angle of something you're looking at is how you're going to create your ice in the world. So there you go. It's basically, it's an input thing. So, and why didn't we just copy the druid mechanic? Well, in a lot of ways, the feel of a class has to do with how your input mechanics work. So there you go.
Cool. All right. So, okay, the next one I think is probably more a question that I'll tackle because I've been more involved in it than you have lately, which is where are we on building the new player experience? And this is a great question. It also, I get a lot of times people ask me the question, why did you wait till the end of the project to build the new player experience? Because it does definitely mean, right, that people who come in the game, they don't know what the hell to do. Like they just are dropped in the game and they're like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. And a lot of times then, 90% of the cool gameplay that we've built, they're not exposed to because they don't know how to get there. And I understand that. The reason that I usually save new player experience till the end is because it's also usually very fragile. If you build a new player experience that says, hey, player, here's the way talent trees work, and then it walks you through that process. If you make any changes to talent trees, for instance, then it breaks that new player experience. So you're in this constant iteration cycle of, hey, we made another change, the tutorial is broken. Hey, we made another change, the newbie quests are broken. So I tend to save them till the end. Now, I will say that this is one that this is my normal way of thinking about it, having done, 3 other MMOs and this being my 4th, is I have learned over time to save the tutorial new player experience stuff till the end. That may not have been the best lesson for me to take into this project, frankly, because those games weren't like this one in that I wasn't subjecting backers to the new player experience earlier than we had the chance to build it. So because I didn't have backers before, right? Historically, it's always been, hey, this project has been cooking for the last 4 years and you guys have never even heard of it. So by the time it pops up, it's only got a couple years before launch. That's kind of the norm. So so if I had to do it over again, I might have changed that approach, frankly. But it is where we are now, right? I mean, it doesn't matter now because we're already here. So anyway, to the actual question at hand, which is where are we now in the new player experience? We're in the middle of building it. So we do have a very basic kind of rudimentary quest system that we're using to guide the player through it. I say rudimentary and basic because it really is. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to extend out the newbie experience. It still is something that can be completed in under 2 hours. Right, in a couple hours you can get yourself up to max level with a white vessel. And if you have friends who are willing to twink you or just hand you items to sacrifice, you can do it in more like 15 or 20 minutes. So it's really there to teach people the way the game works. I mean, that's the purpose of the system, is to bounce you through all of the core systems that you'll need so that when you get dumped into your first campaign, you don't just have a horrible experience where you lose and you lose and you lose. So so that's the purpose of it. We're right now in the process of working on all the pieces. I've got somebody who's working on the tool. I've got somebody who's working on laying out the quest lines. I've got somebody else who's working on what the initial quest zones are and how they're connected to each other. And somebody who's working on the lore, sort of how that weaves together. So it is a major endeavor that we have going on internally. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot there. Right now, there's a couple tutorial tips that fire off, and even those, a fair number of them I want to either pull because I really don't feel like we need a tip that explains to people how a health bar works. Seems a little unnecessary. Or I think they need to be moved out of the tutorial tip system and over into that quest system once it's online. So I think that's a pretty good summary. We're pushing on it kind of as a separate thread, so it is in this version, but it's not part of this version. Meaning, I'm certainly not going to hold up dregs testing based on new player experience. But I think hopefully we are locked in place enough now with a lot of these systems and UIs that are the new UIs coming online that as we make experience will be minimal. It won't be a complete massive rewrite every month. So anyway, there you go. There's where we are. One of them is specifically about something that we weren't actually revealing yet, which is the victory cards. And I think we probably even have an example of this that we can bring up to show people what they look like. But the victory cards are basically tied into the strategy game of the campaign. So what we were trying to do here was provide more avenues to win the game, of trying to capture the world, to win the campaign. We were trying to find a way to do that wasn't just nothing but siege, always siege, right? Now it needs to still tie back into PvP. All these activities were designed to be PvP related. Even the ones that are harvesting and crafting and caravanning are still, at the end of the day, they are conflict-based activities because they happen in the campaign world. Now, it may not be you as an individual who's doing that conflict. You may be actually the crafter, and therefore you're spending your time crafting, but somebody is doing the caravan run. Somebody is out ambushing other people's caravan runs. Somebody is out getting those pieces and bringing them back for you guys to either sacrifice or use to build or use to craft. So the victory cards, I don't know if that screen is up. Let me flip over and see. Can we bring that up? Do we have the example? Great.
Yeah, it's up.
So the victory cards are divided into 3 different decks. You've got a glory deck, a wealth deck, and a power deck. So the power deck is going to be related to the things that you guys have been playing now for the last year or so, which is capturing territory, holding onto territory, killing enemies during a siege. These are the kind of goals that you'll see pop up in the seasonal power card. So the power points that are earned there are doled out different based on each card. So you might have a card that says this is given to any team that kills at least 50 enemies during a siege, or this is going to be given to the top 3 teams or the top 25% of teams. So those cards are going to change every season. The wealth cards are all about building things. So it's all about building up your buildings, building your defenses, building more statues to Zelina or a particular god or goddess. So it's all about the build side of the game. And then the glory one is all about sacrifice. And the sacrifice is basically usually geared towards smaller teams. So some of these cards in here, you will see, like on that victory card, it says comma per player. What that means is that we're taking the total amount of sacrifice or enemy killed or whatever, and we're dividing your results by the number of active participants that you have on your team. So this is basically anti-Zerg mechanic. So it means that I've got a massive guild of 200 people. It is going to be incredibly hard for me to compete with a smaller guild to be able to handle those, to tackle those per player goals. And the other thing that this ties into is basically you collect glory, wealth, and power points over the course of the seasons. At the end, that total number of points is added together to determine the overall victor. But when we get to rewards, we will have secondary and tertiary rewards that are based not on winning the whole campaign, but on doing well in those particular areas. So we might say, hey, here's a particular alabaster Yaga statue, and it's going to be given out to any team that gets at least 17 wealth points over the course of the game. So anyway, so that's we were actually going to talk about this quite so early. We were going to kind of reveal it at one time, but what we didn't think about was our testing campaigns. As we shut them down, as QA would finish testing them, those results would get added to archive campaigns, and players coming into the lobby could click on the old campaigns and see them. So you guys got a bit of a sneak peek. So you'll be seeing more of this as it comes. The other thing I want to point out is at the top you see campaign cards. So these are general rules that are given to everybody regardless of, they don't change out on a seasonal basis. So if I have the top glory card, I know that next season I can aim for that again, and it's always going to be there. It's never going to change. Those are computed on a seasonal basis, but the campaign cards are good for the duration of that entire campaign. The seasonal cards are drawn from decks, and they draw every season, which is nice because it also gives me a reason to check back in. If my team doesn't do well in spring, we can look at the beginning of summer or the beginning of fall and say, okay, what's our new strategy? What can we do? There are also cards in there, by the way, for landless guilds. So there are cards that are specifically in the deck that are, if you begin this season without owning a fort or a keep, so you don't have a stronghold, but you end the season with 1 or 2 or however many points earned or whatever, you get points for that. So we tried to actually have a really nice mix of these. Obviously, we'll play with them and we'll see what we like and what we don't. This is probably going to cause us to initially on test have some very, very short campaigns. We're going to probably have like 4-day campaigns where every season is 1 day, because we want to get maximum amount of iteration out of this system and testing it. So there you go. That was a hell of an answer for an innocuous question.
Yeah, so let me continue on what Todd said a little bit, which is I think the team knocked it out of the park on this one. Todd and I were struggling probably about a year and a half ago with, hey, it's got to be about more than just the blowing up of the siege, and people need to be able to log in, and the smaller members of a guild need to feel like they're making contributions, right? So we took a lot of our inspiration from a lot of like Catan and games like that, where you have these cards and you can do one of those aha moments at the end because you've got longest roads or whatever. It was just, it was basically giving lots of goals for everybody, no matter who's in there playing on a team. And it's not just about blowing up the wall and killing the tree, right? Because there's all kinds of activities that go into that moment of actually doing that players may not feel that they had any impact on, but they really did. Like the players out there harvesting for the team, getting the resources you need, because in any strategy game, the team with the most resources wins, right? It's just not as obvious, right? If you look at any of those like StarCraft championship games, the game is decided in the first couple of minutes based on the resource gathering. So we wanted a way to make those people feel good for the contributions that they're doing for the team, as well as have those big aha moments and just frame it all in a nice, sexy looking UI. I mean, I think Blotty hit it out of the park with this one. Everyone looks at this and it's just like, it feels good.
Yeah, the other thing that I really wanted out of this, Blair, is I wanted some way to change up the rules through the course of the campaign so that we can try to offset early winning syndrome, right? The Uncle Bob scenario where one guild comes out of the gate and they're just so far ahead of everybody else that there's really no way for anybody to catch up. And this is a nice way to do that, right? Having these seasonal cards pop up means that now, just because last season they spent a whole bunch of resources to build the most Zelina statues because they wanted that wealth bonus, the next season that doesn't count anymore. So effectively, they're going to have to rip those statues down and they're going to have to build something else. And they're going to have to do that. They're going to have to replace their resources. So I think that's really critical also here, is it gives me multiple avenues to try and win and multiple opportunities to have comeback. And I think that's really critical.
And it also creates for us the campaign is less repetitive because a card came up that encouraged a certain type of behavior, and then all of a sudden people are shifting over to that behavior.
Sure, absolutely.
Be it searching the world for Winter's Rose or really doubling down on the points of interest and doing caravan runs.
Yeah.
Right. So that's great too, because again, it's part of the DNA of Crowfall, which is no campaign is ever supposed to feel like a previous one.
Yeah, right? For sure. And again, it doubles down on the idea that the game is a constant state of change. The time makes a difference. If I go from spring to fall, it's a different game. If I actually look at the game, everything is different. Not just the player activities, but even the rules. So I also love that this let us put in, we have some really interesting little, I think they're called accumulators because they're just accumulating data, but we have some interesting triggers. Like I can basically say, hey, we're going to put a power card in, or a glory card, right? That's all about sacrificing enemy heads into the brazier to Cain. Or I can say this one is all about killing enemies during a siege from stealth, an assassination card. Like basically all of these interesting behaviors that were possible in the game, but they were just a thing, now can actually become a thing where it becomes, oh shit, we need more assassins. We need more rogues. Right. So anyway, I think it's a really cool system, and it's very, very extensible over time as well. It also is great because it brings our beautiful Dave Greco art to the forefront, which is nice. I love getting that stuff in the game.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on from the victory card stuff because there's so much more to it. We're getting a ton of questions about it, and we need to save a little something for the honeymoon.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so the next one was a caravan question, Mr. Blair, and I'll hand this to you, but I'll go ahead and expound on a little bit, which is, okay. So you've got I saw this one actually pop up in Discord. You've got caravan runs now. So if those caravan runs in the God's Reach, if I can actually grab, blocks of stone, bring them back to a refinery, and use them to create stacks of green and blue resources, then why would I bother to do that in a campaign world? Because I can do it in the safety of the God's Reach, and I don't have to worry about being killed. So answer that question. How does this not shortcut the economy loop?
So we have different kinds of pigs that are in different kinds of world bands. The pigs that you find in God's Reach only produce white quality materials, which can be converted into white quality resources. The pigs in the campaign worlds like dregs can produce up to epic quality purple quality materials, which then can be turned into epic quality resources. Also, to see those epic qualities, you actually need a buff that comes from the. I'm waiting for some. You gonna do it, or are we gonna call it the right way?
I'm sorry, I wasn't actually listening to your answer. I was looking at the next question.
Gotcha. Basically, you need a buff from our caravansary. Right? This word has a
Caravansary.
Caravansary building, and without that buff, you won't be able to get the epic quality materials from the run. Also, that stat comes from one of our races. They get it, which is the Ganetian Plentiful Hall, and you guys have already seen that on the test server. However, those pigs aren't enabled to give you the better stuff that comes from the Dregs campaigns.
Okay, so let me do that follow-on question real quick, just because it's important, because it kind of begs the question, hey, so why did you include caravan runs at all in God's Reach? And the answer is God's Reach is our training zone. Like, that's why God's Reach exists, is I want to train the player on these basic mechanics so that they'll have an idea of how they work and they won't have to learn them in the field while they're being killed. So that's why they're there. And eventually that new player experience we talked about earlier will thread you through all of this stuff, right? It'll introduce you to the idea of how to take an outpost, how to take a fort, how to take a keep, how to make a caravan run. Now, I don't think we need all of the things in there, right? We don't need to teach you about city building and victory cards. There can be some pieces that can come later, but at least the baseline, how do I participate in the activity? I wanted to give that to people early enough in the game that they were prepared when they got to the campaign worlds.
Yeah.
So UXA Gaming has a question about the caravan stuff. He said, why would you gather like a miner if you can just get mats from caravans?
Well, they are different activities, and some of them have different risk than the others. So doing a caravan run is probably going to be a high-risk activity in the dregs because everybody wants those materials because they have a chance for a payload, or they're just doing lots of them to build up their strongholds. So you're going to see
I was just going to say that there's a big opportunity cost if you're using caravans to refine them to make material to make resources. So we draw a distinction. Materials are the big blocks of stone, right, that you use to build your city walls. You also have resources which are used in crafting to create swords and shields and things like that. The refinery lets you take materials and convert them into resources. But if you're doing that, you're not using those materials to build your walls, to build your barracks, to build your arcane armor. You can't, and you only have so many pigs and so many caravan runs. So that's a choice. That's a trade-off. If you want to do it, you certainly can. And it probably for that reason will be a nice catch-up mechanic if a guild has just found themselves basically with no supplies. But they're going to lose out on doing it, and that means their walls are not going to be as strong. Their guards are not going to be as strong.
Well, several people in the chat have also made the point that you don't get, if you're just doing the caravans, you're not getting the eternal dust or ethereal dust. You're not getting the other like byproducts that come, valuable stuff that happens when you actually harvest. So there's a difference too.
If you don't think for a second that players like Zybeck are going to be circling the refineries stealth like sharks, waiting to jump people, the second they turn in their caravan run, you're deluding yourself. It is not going to be. It's not going to be as easy as harvesting.
One. Like you guys. He's just drawn that way.
He just puts out the videos. That's
right.
why we pick on him. Is he's the one who puts out the videos. If some of you other guys want to put out videos that are equally terrible, I'll start using you as my bad student example. So
yeah, he just happens to be the one. So
yeah, there you go. Which is, hey, now that we've all been reset, we've had a full wipe, and the skills has been set to 1.0. There's no way crafters are going to be competitive with War Tribe drops for some period of time. And that's absolutely true. So we know that's an issue. We have a hands that we want to attack the issue. I'm just not talking about it yet because I don't want to. The problem is if I say, hey, here's one solution, and we eventually don't do it or don't have time for it and have to go with something that's not quite as cool, I get roasted for it. So I'm trying to be careful about what we promise. We do recognize that it's a problem, and we do actually want to try and address that problem. So I'll say that. But I'm not so bold right now as to say, and here's going to be the solution, because we got to get this game done. I mean, at the end of the day, you guys can tell, just we know as well, like there's just a lot of polish, right? We need to be spending time on our frame rate and our UI and some of those basics, and I got to get that stuff done first. So, so there you go. I know that's not the answer everybody wanted to hear, but you know me, I don't like to shirk. I don't like people to feel like I'm shirking a question just because it's a hard question.